Hello folks, it's Mr. Neil here, and in this video we're going to continue looking at Python as part of our software development unit. Last session we were looking at output variables and input, so to get you thinking about that I want you to complete this short starter task before we progress. So we're going to create a new program called Math with Variables. The program should ask the user for two numbers and store them. The program should then output an appropriate message informing the users of the two numbers that were entered. So you can see here in my example I've got two numbers 6 and 3, and then I'm outputting to say that the two numbers I have entered is 6 and 3. Please pause the video now and create that program. This week we are going to be looking at maths with variables. So what does that mean? Well, by the end of this week you'll be able to explain the different mathematical operators in Python and how to use them. You'll be able to implement Python code that utilises simple maths, so that's addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, using fixed numbers and variables, and you'll be able to convert from strings to integers and vice versa. So last week we looked at how the computer outputs the information and how the computer inputs the information into the program. So what we're looking at this week is we're looking at the processing in between it. So we're going to start looking at how we can process that input that comes into the program before we then output it out to the system. So there are four basic mathematical operators, and these are the same mathematical operators that you'll use elsewhere in the school: addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. And generally speaking, the symbols that represent each are very similar. However, if you look on your keyboard, you will find no division symbol, and whilst you will find an X, it doesn't represent multiplication. So for multiplication we use an asterisk, which can be found by pressing Shift and 8 on your keyboard, and for division we use a backslash, which can be found on the question mark key. And as you can see on the right hand side of the screen, we have got some Python code where we utilise addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. And what we do to begin with is we store three values. So I've got three values and these are stored in three different variables. And in my addition I'm adding 1 and 3 and outputting the answer. In my subtraction I'm subtracting 3 and 2 and outputting it. In multiplication I'm multiplying 1 and 2. And in my division, I'm dividing 3 and 1. And then I've got a complex one down the bottom. What I would like you to do on a piece of paper, write down what you think the output is going to be for each of the 5 print statements. Once you've got that written down, go and write this code in Python and see if what the computer gives you is the same as what you think. So pause the video now and go and do that. Last week we were looking at variables, and we created variables and we put text into them and we used those variables to do stuff. And we're going to do the exact same this week. Instead of putting text in them, we're going to put numbers into them. And the way Python works with numbers is a little bit different. So let's just head over to REPL and see how Python deals with numbers. So here we are in REPL, and the code in front of me is similar to what you would have got in the starter task. We have got two numbers, in this case 6 and 3, and then we've got the output you entered 6 and 3. So we're going to go and do some maths with these numbers. So I'm just going to add a line in, and I'm going to say add equals num1 plus num2, and then I'm going to print out add. Okay, and that's similar to what you've just done. Now if I run that, I enter in 6 and I enter in 3. When I add them, I'm told that the answer is 63. So that's not 6 and 3, that should be 9. And this is because what we've done is we've concatenated the value 6 with the value 3. And this is because when we create variables, Python defaults to making sure that they're text. So if we want them to be number, we need to convert them from strings or text to integers or numbers. So on line 1, we want input enter num1 to return an integer. So before it, I'm just going to type integer open bracket, and then close bracket. And then again, I'm going to put integer, open bracket, close bracket. So that will now mean that num1 and num2 are integers. So if I run that, enter 6 and 3, now I will get an error. It is telling me there is an error on line 4. And line 4 is where I print out the information. And we now have an error because you entered is text and the value of num1 is a number. And we can't use an add symbol to add string or text with a number. We can only add strings together or we can only add numbers together. So I'm going to convert this here to a string. Now it might be a little bit confusing to begin with, but you get used to that when you output a number, you have to make sure it is a string. And now when I run it, 6 and 3, you entered 6 and 3, 9. What does that 9 mean? No context, so let's give it a meaning. So we're going to say print add, and we need to convert it to a string. So we are going to click run. And now when I enter 6 and 3, we get that the answer is 9. One of the mistakes that you might make when you are coding this program is that you might forget brackets. So remember, every bracket that opens has to close. So we open a bracket after int, we open a bracket after input, so we've opened 2 brackets, so we have to close them. And if I forget to close a bracket, when I run my program, I will get told invalid syntax. And that means I have broken the rules of the language. So that's how you work with numbers as variables in Python. Anytime you want a variable to be a number, you have to put int before it, and that converts into an integer, which is another word for a number. When you want to output a text and a number, you need to convert that number to a string, which is another word for text, and that's what that str does. So it's now over to you. What I would like you to do is edit your maths with variables program, the one that you made as part of the starter, and I want you to change it so instead of it storing 2 numbers, it asks the user to enter 2 numbers. The program should then add, subtract, multiply and divide your 2 numbers, and lastly it should output all of your answers. Okay, and the output that you get will look something similar to the one I have on the right, where at the top we have asked for the 2 numbers, we're telling the user what they have entered, and then we're telling them the answer of the addition, the subtraction, the multiplication and the division. So pause the video now and go and do that task. Having completed that task, you should have something similar to what you see on screen. A couple of points to note is remembering that when we input an integer or a number, we have to put int before it. And when we are combining text and numbers, we have to convert the number or the integer to a string. And that's what str does. And you can see I have done it down here at the bottom. What you might want to do is you might want to pause the video here and just compare my program with your program and make sure they're similar. They might not be identical, but check that they're similar. Now that you've got to grips with how to use maths with variables, there are 2 challenge tasks that I would like you to complete. Challenge 2 is creating a carpet calculator, and challenge 3 is creating a Nat5 math percentage calculator for Mr. Nicholson. You'll find full details for both these challenges in the PDF. Good luck and all the best.